What will the Maple Leafs do with their pending RFAs? And could Brad Treliving circle back on a midseason trade proposal this summer? We'll get into all of that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'd imagine that Edmonton, Florida Game 3 tomorrow night in Edmonton is going to be a hot ticket out there. So if anyone plans on going, use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL and get yourself $20 off that ticket. They're going to be expensive, so save $20 where you can. Pay for a beer for yourself at the game, because beers are basically $20 at almost every arena nowadays, it feels. How do you feel about Edmonton, by the way, when it comes to having a chance to come back in this series? Or is this one kind of over for you already? Like, I know Barkov, his status is unknown for tomorrow. He was at practice, I believe, today, which is a good thing, especially if you're a Florida fan. But, you know, did the Oilers have a shot still in your mind, or is this just like, hurry up, let's get this over with? We know it's going to end up in Florida.
I think there's still an opportunity here for Edmonton. Obviously, you know, if they lose game 3, it's kind of putting the nail in the coffin in this sort of way. Mm-hmm. Like, they have to win, obviously, 4 or 5 to even win the cup, which I don't like their chances, like, especially with the way Bobrovsky's been playing. That's what makes, I think, it tough for me. I think, like, yeah, Edmonton's gone through some tough teams like Vancouver, Dallas, and LA. But, like, Florida's been the most complete team they've played all playoffs. Right? Everything's kind of going for them. And I don't think Edmonton's fully healthy either. Like, we're talking about, you know, obviously the Barkov factor, but I don't think, like, Nurse isn't healthy. Evander Kane's not healthy.
Leon too.
Yeah, like, guys are not, like, in my opinion, Edmonton's similar to Florida from last year, where get to the Cup Final and it went through such a battle that there's just nothing left there. I think Florida kind of learned, and that's why I think Florida's going to win it, because I think Florida, they want to say that, you know, Edmonton tried to put away that experience that they had last year, but I think it truly gave Florida an idea of what they needed to do to win the cup this time around. I think it was last year they were on such an emotional high that they just didn't have enough at the end. This year, I think they were better prepared for it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Good observation. I think, you know, just ultimately Florida's the better team, and the better team's going to end up winning in the end. And it's crazy, man. It's crazy when you think about how quickly things changed over there. They went from being a bunch of softies that Big Walt, Keith Tkachuk, couldn't stand, apparently. They were outside looking in on a playoff spot a year and a half ago, and all of a sudden they've now made 2 trips to the Stanley Cup Final and might be taking home Old Lordo just, you know, a year and a couple months later. It's wild how quickly things have changed down in Sunrise. All right, let's get into the Leafs news of the day. There's not necessarily much news going on right now. Still a bunch of kind of speculation throughout the off season. But the latest report we heard from David Pagnotta of the fourth period, apparently the Leafs could potentially circle back on a potential deal that they were working on throughout the season, was unable to come to fruition, obviously. But apparently the Leafs were speaking with the San Jose Sharks on Mario Ferraro and Luke Kunin, both of which still could be moved this summer by the Sharks. And the Leafs, Pagnotta reporting that they could go back and kind of kick tires. Would you like these additions to the Toronto Maple Leafs, Dave?
I mean, Ferraro's name has been talked about forever, and like if you looked at the analytics, they're not exactly favorable toward Ferraro. But I always remind people that you can't look at just the player; you also have to look at the situation, especially defensemen. He played for the San Jose Sharks. That team was a tire fire, if there ever was one last year. So there is something there. I like the fact that he, is a top 4 option. Signed to a pretty reasonable deal. The only thing is, though, it's another left shot defenseman, and that's what makes that's why I was a little confused about it, because the Leafs don't need right shot; they need a left shot. They need right shot defenseman. He's 25, so obviously there's still a little more there. I think maybe. I'm sure like what he is what he is, but 25, he's also the right age as well. But yeah, I don't know. The fact that he's a left shot is what's giving me pause for concern. And Luke Kunin, that's a guy was a former first round pick, would be a good depth option for them. The only thing is that he is an RFA and arbitration eligible. So don't know what the heck that deal would like, that contract potential would look like.
What did he make last year? So, like, what is his arbitration, I guess? Luke Kunin, going to use cap friendly, something that we won't be able to do in a little bit.
That's been made official, by the way, by the Capitals.
Yeah.
Not only are they buying the website, but the people working there are also going to be joining the front office.
Well, that's the point of what you're buying, right? Like, you're buying the people, you're buying the company, right? Like, they don't have to buy the website, because obviously they could just use the website if that's what they wanted. It's the people who built it who have a bright mind, obviously, to come up with stuff like this. 2.75
made 2.75.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a high contract. I don't know if I'd want to circle back on a Kunin. I don't know if I see him as like a $3 million player. I think there's guys in free agency who,
that's why it didn't make there's probably a reason why the deals never went through. Probably San Jose was looking for a pretty steep price, and the Leafs are just like, yeah, no, we're okay.
Right.
So I personally don't see the appeal right now for the Leafs to do that. I think when you look at the way the Cup Final is going, especially, you need those bigger bodies. You need guys that are going to play with a little more jam. And I don't know if those guys really provide that.
Well, Ferraro does. Ferraro definitely provides the jam, if you will. He 6 foot, 209 pounds, so 6 feet, 210. Hits like a truck, but he's a dash 69. Dash 69 over the last 2 years. Shares a birthday with Austin Matthews, actually. Well, I don't know if it's the same year. What year was Matthews born? He's like a 96, 97? 97, I think.
97.
Yeah, okay. So he's same date, just a year later than Austin Matthews, his birthday. So that's one potential option that the Blue Jays. Wow, that's a Freudian slip. That the Maple Leafs could do to improve their blue line and maybe improve their depth a little bit. Could they circle back on Mario Ferraro and Luke Kunin? Should note that in the report, Pagnotta also did say that a lot of teams were interested in Mario Ferraro throughout the season. Obviously, no one met San Jose's asking price, but I'm guessing that would probably mean that there's a few teams that would be kicking tires again this offseason, and there could be a bit of a bidding war. So, yeah, we'll see if that ends up being an option for the Maple Leafs at some point this offseason, or maybe they decide, we don't need to give up anything. There's enough in free agency, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at free agency yet, but I had a quick peek-see. And I've got a few players, actually, that do interest me to fill some of those roles that both Ferraro and Kunin would fill. So why don't we take a break? We'll come back. We'll do a little rapid fire. I've got a few names for you. I want to get your thoughts on them. So we'll come back. We'll look at some possible Leafs free agent targets, and we'll dive a little deeper into the Maple Leafs pending RFAs. What are they going to do with those players? What type of contracts should they sign? We'll get to all that and more next on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA and NHL Finals tickets even faster and easier. Price on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to puck drop. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets. They've got priority last-minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy events, theaters, whichever. They've got flash deals, they've got zone deals, all in pricing, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you as always. We're a 5-day-a-week podcast. Each weekday we're putting out new content for you guys. So if you haven't already and you're enjoying the content so far, make sure that you're subscribed. Some up on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. For you on-the-go audio listeners, you can find it wherever you download your podcasts. And we're here to provide you content all throughout the off season, 5 days a week here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. So we were just talking about potentially a few free agent targets that the Maple Leafs could have, so they won't necessarily have to give up picks and prospects to go out and get guys like a Mario Ferraro or a Luke Kunin or whomever the Leafs might be targeting in the trade route. I want to play a little game called Gas or Pass, Dave. I'm going to just kind of throw out a couple of free agent names, and you let me know if you like the idea or you don't like it. So if you like it, you're going to say that's gas. If you don't like it, pass, brother. Pass on that bad boy. Let's start on the blue line, where there's a surprising amount of blue liners that are actually out there in the free agent market this year, which is good for the Maple Leafs. So lots of targets that they could go after. And let's start up at the tippy top with what is probably my number one free agent target. I'd be curious to hear if it's yours as well. But it's Toronto boy Chris Tanev. Does he finally come home to Toronto? Gas or pass, you'd be interested in that reunion?
Gas for sure. I know there's people going to have the injury concerns with Chris Tanev, but he's the type of guy you need in the cups, in the playoffs. If you want to get far, he's going to do whatever he can to, whether sacrifice his body, play against top competition. Like that guy was playing against McDavid, and when he got hurt, Dallas they kind of fell off.
Yep.
And it's like that's a team that has already good blue liners already, but it just showed how important he was to that team when he got hurt. So I am a big Chris Tanev fan.
Yeah, I am as well. Hopefully they can bring Tanev to Toronto. Bring him home, Toronto. Bring him home. We'll stick with the theme of blue liners. Brett Pesce, gas or pass?
Pass.
Pass. Really?
I think he's going to be. I think he's getting up there in age. He also has injury concern. Like even I think more so than Tanev. Like
really?
He didn't play most of the playoffs for the.
Yeah, but like, is that just a one-off, or has he been injured like his whole career? I can't even recall.
I think he's been like.
Yeah, he's only played 182.
Only had one.
282 game seasons, and only like once, twice, 3 times has he played more than 73 games.
Like it's not. I'm not even gonna say that's the reason. Like I just think like you're looking at what he provides as a right shot. It's exactly what you think the Leafs would need. 30 years old, so he's going to be 30 next season. So it's not like he's old by any. I'm just worried that what that contract would look like, right?
Yeah.
For he's a guy that's going to try to strike it rich, and I don't know if the Leafs are going to be able to afford it, basically for a guy who's strictly a defensive defenseman.
Yeah, there'll probably be a bit of a bidding war, and I'd rather the Leafs stay out of those bidding wars. And you'll have to give term, I would imagine, on a Brett Pesce type deal. And yeah, the first, I think, 2-3 years might look good, but then years 4 or 5, maybe not so great. Similarly to the way that TJ Brody flamed out, toward the end of his deal. All right, one more right shot defenseman for you, Dylan DeMello. Gas or pass?
Pass. I think it's another guy that might get actually quite a bit of interest in free agency. Again, yes, he's another right shot guy, but I'm worried that like he would automatically go to the Leafs bottom pairing, and I wonder what that will cost. Right?
I don't think so. I think he probably slots in next to Riley.
Do you think he slot next to Riley? Interesting.
Yeah.
I think he's a decent defenseman. I watched him quite a bit in Winnipeg. He's got a little bit of offensive upside, but I just think like in terms of my pecking order of guys, like he's kind of lower, right? I prefer Tanev over DeMello. But I thought also he stepped up quite a bit in the playoffs when they lost Brendan Dillon. Like DeMello kind of stepped up for him and did play some big minutes, but I just think his ceiling is quite low for what I think.
He played pretty big minutes with them all year. He averaged almost 22 minutes a night this season for Winnipeg. Was kind of playing quite a bit for them. 31 points. He was, whether or not you think plus minus means anything, but plus 46. So like on the ice for 46 more goals than he was when his team scored. The one he was wasn't scored on a whole lot. Was fantastic defensively. 139 blocks, 167 hits. I'm pretty big on Dylan
what would you be
DeMello.
willing to pay him? Because I think he made $3 million on his last deal. I wanted him actually when the Senators had him available for a trade, like back a few years ago, and then he went to Winnipeg.
I give him like mid fours. I think
I could probably come around to it.
Yeah, I think mid fours.
If you can get him on the right deal, I wouldn't hate it. I guess maybe. Yeah, I could be convinced to swipe right on that.
Cool. All right, couple forwards for you. I'm gonna throw. Actually, I got one more defenseman. Sorry, this one's a bit of a dark horse. Jalen Chatfield.
I've heard this name. I don't hate it. Actually.
I've heard this name.
I remember watching.
Yeah,
I watched him quite. He was a name that kind of stood out to me during the. Obviously, Carolina's series against New York. He played. He's another guy that had to step in and play some big minutes as well, especially when Pesce was out. He was kind of the guy that slotted in that position as like a guy that maybe I don't know what that contract would look like again, but I would swipe right if the deal makes sense. Big body, right shot defenseman.
Yeah. I like him as like your number 5, like your third pair right shot guy who in a pinch you could move up if injuries kind of accrue. Like he's an upgrade on Timothy Liljegren. Like he's kind of what you want Liljegren to be in a way. So that would be me. For me, the contract that I was thinking in my head is like, I don't think it'd be that much. Like he's really only had 1.5 like good years. So maybe he takes a bit of a bridge. I believe he's like what, 27, I think. So if he takes like a 2-year bridge at like 2.85, maybe in that realm, maybe 3 million. I think that could be a deal that I'd be willing to make to get a nice beefy Jalen Chatfield, could kill penalties. That's like a low key one. I don't think he's someone you're going to be playing in the top pair, like next to Morgan Riley. But if you're looking for, an upgrade on the right side with size on Timothy Liljegren, I think Jalen Chatfield would kind of be that type of player. So like you get Tanev and Chatfield, or you get DeMello and Chatfield. You've now got your right side kind of figured out with Tanev/DeMello. Keep Jake McCabe on your right on your second pair. And you got Jalen Chatfield kind of filling in as your third pair. And you kind of like the look of that.
You know who Jalen Chatfield's agent is?
Don't tell me it's the same agent as Mitch Marner.
Mr. Darren Ferris.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think that. I mean, obviously, I'm not. It's not like a Scott Boras thing where he's gonna have a a vendetta.
I think Edmondson is also a Darren Ferris client too.
Yes, he is.
So it's not like there's a bad blood between those guys. I mean, it's a Marner situation, if anything. But yeah, so those are the defensemen that I kind of saw. Maybe we could do some forwards on tomorrow's show or something, and just really quickly, we're gonna do a deep dive and do a bunch of top fives and whatnot, and take a look at a bunch of different free agents. But that was just something I thought quickly would be a fun little exercise to do, a little swipe left, swipe right for today. Let's come back and get into our RFA deep dive on the 4 players that the Maple Leafs have that are restricted free agents this summer. What to do with them, we'll discuss next on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Today's show is brought to you by Policy Genius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of the unknowns. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family quick and easy. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Your work or life insurance may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, or even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policy Genius have had thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We are continuing the road to 10K subscribers. So if you have yet to subscribe to the podcast and you enjoy listening to Dave and I, or if you would like to win yourself a Maple Leafs jersey, make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Leafs podcast on YouTube. When we get to 10,000 subs, we'll be giving away a jersey. So make sure that you sub up. And the quicker we do that, the quicker one of you lucky listeners can get yourself a jersey. Also, reminder that Friday we'll be doing a mailbag episode, so get your questions in below. We'll kind of sift through all the comments, and if you got any questions for a mailbag next on Friday, put them down below. All right, RFA deep dive, Dave. Let's get into it. So we've got 4 restricted free agents that the Maple Leafs have to make decisions with: Timothy Liljegren, Connor Dewar, Nick Robertson, and Noah Gregor. Let's start with the lone defenseman, since we've kind of been on the defensive theme all day long. So here's what we got in Liljegren. So 25 years old, right shot defenseman. He's played 196 games so far, 65 points. Often a bit of a liability come playoff time. We've seen him come out of the lineup, not necessarily a fixture, a mainstay in this Leafs lineup yet. There's been times where he's looked pretty good, where he's been thrusted into a top 4 role, and you think there's flashes, and then he goes through long spells where it's like, maybe he's not the player we think that he is. The qualifying offers at $1.4 million. What are the Leafs doing with Timothy Liljegren? Does Timothy Liljegren have a future here in Toronto?
I think you qualify him at 1.4. Like, that's not something I'm overly concerned about paying. It's just I don't know. This is a big Craig Berube question. Can you get him to be an everyday NHL defenseman? Like, which I think he is. It's just, can he be that guy in the playoffs that you can count on, and not just be good, but can kind of elevate himself? And so, I would like to keep Liljegren around. Right shot defensemen are, as you know, are tough to get. We've seen flashes of what he can be. It's just we haven't seen them consistently enough, and that's my concern, is the consistency. And you got teams like Florida now, who if you're a defenseman, if you got the deer, what do they got? Deer in the headlights kind of vibe to you, you're not going to succeed well, especially in this Atlantic division.
Yeah, exactly. And Liljegren's has had some deer and headlight tendencies over the last couple of years, that's for sure. I think you bring up a good point where, maybe the Leafs almost owe it to themselves and Liljegren to give him a shot with Berube and see what it looks like. I think we know what it looks like with Sheldon Keefe. Sheldon Keefe is pretty well like the only pro North American head coach that Liljegren's ever known, really. I mean, he was with him when he was with the Marlies, and then it wasn't that long after he came and ended up being a Maple Leaf once Babcock got fired, and along came Keefe. So, Liljegren's really played a lot under one person for the majority of his pro career here in North America. So getting a new voice maybe could unlock something in Timothy Liljegren. So I think the Leafs do owe it to themselves to give him a shot, give him a 1-year deal, probably see what he can do with it under Craig Berube. Thinking what, high ones, like I saw, was it Myrtle? I think it might have been Myrtle's piece or something. Either Myrtle or I think it was Myrtle, suggesting that it was like the comparables could be in the 3 to 4 million range. I'm like, no,
guy, where are you getting these numbers from?
No. I mean, Timmy Lils, I'm looking high ones, like 2 million max is what would be the top dollar there for Timmy Lils. All right, moving on. They've got 3 other forwards. Let's talk about the one that probably is going to have maybe the most to say, and it's Nick Robertson, Nicky Bobby, 22-year-old left winger, had his best season in the pros this year, 14 goals, 13 assists, 27 points in just 56 games, was on pace for 20 goals if he had played all 82 games, despite averaging just 11 minutes and 23 seconds a game. But here's the positive for Nicky Bobby. He stayed healthy all year for the first time in his pro career. It's been like 5 years of hell for this guy, where just when it seemed like he was starting to get going, he would suffer some sort of setback or injury. This year, no injuries. Went back and forth between the minors and sat in the press box a little bit, yes, but no injuries. So that's a positive for Nick Robertson going forward. That being said, when you look at the lineup, what's there right now, a guy who is, in and out of the lineup, even in the playoffs, is Nick Robertson part of the future here in Toronto?
I'm having a hard time. Having a guy like him around is a nice luxury to have, but at the same time, like we've seen, he doesn't work in a bottom 6 role. He needs to be, he needs the power play time. He needs the elevated role, and I don't know if Craig Berube is going to give it to him. Like, not that he should just give it to him. He needs to earn it. I just think that when you look at what they have coming up in the pipeline too, like Easton Cowan isn't far away. And I think like an Easton Cowan kind of makes Nick Robertson a bit expendable, because Nick Robertson's purely an offensive guy. He hasn't really developed that other part of his game. And that's why I think, if you can find a way to package him for something, this offseason, I think you should consider it. I just think that, yeah, the potential's been there, but he just hasn't shown it enough when he has had to play regularly in the lineup.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I'm not sure Nick Robertson has a spot in this lineup. I was kind of going through, and this team's going to add also, and they're going through kind of a different off season where they're going to be going over a bit of an identity makeover in a way. And I don't think Nick Robertson necessarily fits what they're trying to do. That's Nick Robertson is the epitome of the old Leafs, right? Of the Dubas Leafs, where it was like speed, skill, speed, skill, speed, skill. Now it's size, grit, size, grit, size, grit, right? They've completely done a 180, especially more so when you're looking at their depth and role players, and that's exactly what Nick Robertson is. So, yeah, it's interesting. I was looking up, what could be comps for Nick Robertson contract. I don't think he'd be expensive to re-up on another deal. I remember Kyler Yamamoto a few years ago when he came off his ELC. I think it was 1.175 is what he ended up signing for. I think that's a similar deal that Nicky Robertson would be looking for. So, like a 1.1 or a $1 million 1-year deal. Let's see what happens. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I think the preference would be to probably, trade him, try and get something for him, whether it's, a draft pick of some kind or another prospect that has waiver eligibility. Him not being waiver eligible also hurts his stock a little bit for the Maple Leafs, not allowing them to kind of yo-yo him and use up that cap space and that roster spot. So yeah, Roberts is going to be an interesting player to see what ends up happening with him throughout the summer. All right, last one. I think this one, actually there's two more. Sorry. Connor Dewar. Connor Dewar was acquired by the Maple Leafs at the trade deadline, played a lot for this team. 24-year-old versatile player, played center and left wing, plays good north-south style game with good downhill speed, had 11 goals, 8 assists, 19 points in 74 games this season. Also had 38 blocks, 123 hits, and a 21-6 takeaway giveaway ratio, which I didn't realize it was that high, but very positive number. He has arbitration rights. And he's coming off of a deal where I think he was making like $975 or $850 or something like that. He was making, like league minimum basically in and around that. I would think similar to Nick Robertson, you're looking at probably a 1-year, $1 million deal in that range. I think Connor Dewar is part of this team going forward though. He was acquired to be kind of like a future fourth liner for this team.
And he's done that. Penalty, he helped the penalty kill.
Yeah.
He has some speed to him, but he's got tenacity, right? You don't necessarily always need big guys. Need guys who are going to play big. And I think he does that. And I like his skating ability. He's quite sneaky too. So I liked his addition. I think he's a solid player. And I don't think he's going to cost that much to bring back. So yeah, I like him I like what he can do next year.
I think there's a little bit more offense to him. He had 10 goals in Minnesota before he got traded to Toronto. So the goals didn't really come when he got here. He had just one through the regular season. I think he did score one in the playoffs too, if I'm not mistaken. But I think, this is a guy who he could put up 10 to 12, 13 goals, which is, I guess, what you're asking for out of a fourth line, kind of defensive minded player. That's the type of, tertiary scoring you're asking for out of your bottom six role players. So yeah, I like Connor Dewar. What about Noah Gregor? I mean, 25 years old. He was already non-tendered a year ago by, I think, San Jose. Center left wing, had 6 goals and 6 assists in 63 games this season. Guy who played with a lot of good speed, has a willingness to forecheck, but not much else to Noah Gregor's game. And we talk about Nick Robertson maybe being a little expendable. I think you probably sit here and think Noah Gregor even more so. I'm not sure he even receives a qualifying offer, and he probably just ends up into unrestricted free agency for a second straight summer.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I envisioned it. Again, he showed that he can skate really well. He would score sometimes if he had the open lane to shoot. I figure
when he hit the net.
When he would hit the net, exactly. So I think, yeah, he's another guy where I'd rather try to get someone who's a little more versatile, can bring more of a two-way game. And he took way too many penalties too. He was one of those guys that, as a fourth liner, you can't be taking penalties. So I would say, yeah, it might be time to close that chapter.
I think so too. So, I guess to wrap things up, Liljegren, we think still think he's part of the mix here. Connor Dewar, definitely part of the mix. Nick Robertson, we'll see what happens with him. He's more of a 50-50. Certainly will be QO'd, but whether or not he is with this team throughout the rest of the offseason, he is in Delta at some point, and that remains to be seen. But Noah Gregor, I think, is the one RFA that probably not going to receive a QO. And we'll go. There are, I guess, technically some other RFAs down in the minors, like Dylan Gambrell and some random other guys that I don't think will factor in much, that I didn't feel like we needed to talk about. But those are kind of the four big boys that the Maple Leafs will have decisions on in the coming weeks. I mean, the before you know it, you're going to have all your RFAs locked up before they hit UFA status. The qualifying offer deadline is coming up in a couple of weeks. So we'll know what's going to be happening with these players relatively soon. All right, buddy. That's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.